For 8 years, a former Marine has driven past a certain place on the map, a place he swore he would never return to. But today, he's going back not because he's ready, but because running from the past finally hurts more than facing it. Beside him is the only witness who never left his side. A German shepherd trained to keep him alive, when memories try to pull him back into a war that ended for everyone else except him. At the end of this road, there's a lake. At the bottom of that lake, a truth he's carried like a bullet in his chest. What happened there? Why did he lock that memory away for so long? And why, after all these years, is he finally willing to open the wound again? Stay with me. The answer isn't loud. It doesn't explode. It whispers, and it changes everything. If stories like this speak to something inside you, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video so it reaches someone who needs it. Thank you for watching, and may God bless every person who listens to this story. The morning sky over northern Idaho was a pale, washed-out blue, the kind that always seemed colder than it looked. Early autumn had taken hold, and the air carried the sharp bite of the season. Dry wind, rust-colored leaves scraping across the pavement, the kind of chill that made even the gas pumps creak when handled. The old two-lane highway stretching past the station was quiet, except for the occasional pickup truck rumbling by, heading toward logging sites deeper in the mountains. The gas station itself was the kind that time had stopped caring about. A single fading sign, 2 ancient pumps, and a small convenience store with windows dulled by decades of dust and sun. A stray American flag hung from a pole, stiff from the cold breeze. Walter stepped out of his truck with the slow, deliberate movements of a man whose joints had learned to predict weather better than any radio forecast. At 68, he still carried the frame of someone trained by the military, broad shoulders, straight spine, but age and memory had added a heaviness to the way he stood. His hair, once regulation short and dark, was now gray and swept back loosely, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a face marked by deep, permanent lines, the kind carved not just by age but by long years of carrying things he never spoke about. He wore a weather-worn field jacket, the kind Marines often kept even after retirement, and on the chest was a single embroidered Marine Corps emblem, small, unpolished, but impossible to overlook. Beside him, standing alert as though guarding the truck itself, was Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a thick black and tan coat and sharp amber-brown eyes that scanned the surroundings like a trained sentry. Rex was not oversized the way some German shepherds were bred for appearance. He was lean, muscular, with a stance that balanced readiness and patience. His ears twitched at every sound, but his gaze returned to Walter every few seconds, as if checking for a new command. Anyone passing by might have assumed Rex was just a loyal pet, but the reflective harness he wore told a different story. PTSD service dog stitched clearly in black lettering. He was not there for tricks or protection. He was there to anchor someone who sometimes forgot where the present ended and the past began. Walter finished pumping gas and opened the driver's side door. As he reached inside, the glove box door, old and loose, fell open on its own. Something inside clinked against the plastic edge. Rex's ears perked, and he lifted his front paws to the seat, sniffing. The object was a small, scratched metal container, no larger than a deck of cards, the latch slightly bent from years of opening and closing. Walter froze. His hand hovered over it, not quite touching. For a long moment, he didn't breathe. Rex looked up at him, tail still, waiting. Finally, Walter picked the container up. His fingers hesitated on the latch before snapping it open. Inside, Resting on a piece of faded blue cloth was a Purple Heart medal, deep violet enamel surrounding the gold profile of George Washington, the ribbon still smooth as if untouched by time. It was the medal awarded only to those who had bled in war, those who came home with scars others could not see. Walter stared at it, the medal catching the light like something living. He had not opened this box in 8 years. Rex watched, silent, but not passive. He shifted closer, leaning his head against Walter's arm. That was the trained cue, grounding through contact. A reminder that the present moment still existed. Walter didn't look at the dog. His eyes stayed fixed on the medal as if it were a question he had failed to answer for decades. The wind rattled the loose station sign. A semi-truck roared past, shaking the ground. Still, Walter did not move. He finally spoke. Not to Rex, not to anyone, but to the empty air in front of him. I don't even know why I kept this. His voice was low, the kind worn down by disuse rather than weakness. He touched the medal with one finger and closed the box again, slowly, carefully, as though sealing something dangerous back into its cage. He placed it inside the glove box, but this time did not force the latch closed. The box rested there, visible, refusing to disappear the way he wanted it to. Walter exhaled, rubbed the bridge of his nose, then looked down at Rex, who sat patiently at his boot, eyes locked onto him. "You're right," Walter muttered, though Rex had said nothing. "We should keep moving." He shut the truck door and circled back to the pump, but his movements were less steady now, his mind clearly still inside the glove box. A woman exited the gas station just then. Marla, the station clerk, mid-50s, short and round-shouldered with tired eyes. The kind of face molded by years of early shifts and late bills. She wore a faded Idaho Broncos sweatshirt and held a styrofoam cup of coffee like it was the only warm thing in her life. She nodded politely at Walter, only half watching him before her gaze landed on Rex. "That's a handsome shepherd you've got there," she said, voice rough from cigarettes. "Looks like he could take down a bear if he had to." Walter forced a polite smile. "He's smarter than he is mean." Marla chuckled, then her tone softened when she noticed the Marine emblem on his jacket. "Semper Fi?" Walter gave a small nod. "Semper Fi." She didn't press for stories. People in these parts knew better. She only added, "My brother served. Iraq, 04. Didn't talk much when he got home either." Walter didn't respond. He didn't need to. Shared silence was sometimes the closest thing to conversation. Marla walked away, and Walter stood still for a few seconds longer than necessary, staring toward the mountains instead of the road. Rex nudged his hand again. The touch was gentle, rehearsed, meant to pull him back. "Yeah," Walter whispered. "I know. I'm still here." He opened the truck door and climbed in. Before turning the key, he glanced one more time at the half-closed glove box. The metal waited inside, like a truth he still wasn't ready to wear. The engine rumbled alive, and the truck rolled back onto the highway, disappearing into a long stretch of pine forest and silence. I don't understand why humans keep the things that hurt them, but maybe they keep them to remember they survived. The next stretch of highway carried Walter and Rex out of Idaho and into the northern edge of Montana, where the mountains sharpened and the air felt even thinner. By noon, the sun had warmed nothing except the glare on the windshield. Walter's hands stayed fixed on the wheel, but every few miles his eyes flicked toward the glove box, as if the unopened Purple Heart inside were breathing. The road eventually curved toward a small clearing where a weather-beaten sign read, Pine Hollow Diner, home-cooked meals since 1954. The parking lot held only 3 cars and one dusty motorcycle. Walter pulled in. Inside, the diner felt older than the sign. Wood-paneled walls, faded photos of hunting trophies, a jukebox that looked like it had given up decades ago. The smell of coffee and bacon grease floated through the warm air. There were only 4 customers spread out across booths, all older, all quiet. It was the kind of place where strangers didn't ask questions, unless they recognized something familiar. Walter took a booth near the window. Rex sat close at his feet, tail curled neatly around his paws, always aware, always scanning. Their presence drew a few glances, but nothing more, until a man behind the counter looked up. The man was in his mid-70s, tall but slightly stooped, with wiry gray hair and a jaw that looked carved from stone. A heavy scar cut across his left eyebrow and disappeared into his hairline, the kind that hinted at something sharp, metal, and fast. His name tag read, Harlan. He wore a plain flannel shirt, sleeves rolled, revealing forearms still strong but marked by age spots and pale burn scars. His eyes, sharp and alert, landed on the Marine Corps emblem on Walter's jacket. He didn't smile. He didn't introduce himself. He simply walked over with a pot of coffee and said, voice low and steady, Kaisan? Da Nang? Or Fallujah? Walter didn't look up right away. He only answered, I was there, but not all of me came back. Harlan nodded as if he already knew the answer. Same damn story in a different uniform, he muttered. He filled Walter's mug without asking. I was in Hughes City, 68, ground fight, house to house, lost half my platoon in 2 blocks. His tone was flat, practiced, something said so many times it had lost its ability to bleed, but not its ability to sting. Rex lifted his head, sensing the shift in the room. Harlan glanced down at the dog. German Shepherd? He asked. Yeah, Walter said. 5 years old, trained for PTSD support. Harlan let out a rough exhale that wasn't quite a laugh. Figures. Dogs are the only ones who stay when the war never ends. He didn't say it dramatically. He said it like a weather report. A waitress arrived with menus. Lydia, a woman in her late 40s with short blonde hair tied in a loose ponytail, light freckles, and a kind but exhausted face. She carried herself like someone who had raised kids, alone, and still managed to keep the bills paid. Her smile wasn't fake, it was just worn thin from years of using it. What can I get you, gentlemen? She asked, then leaned a little toward Rex. And you too, handsome. Rex blinked politely, earning a small laugh. Walter ordered a simple meal, black coffee, eggs, toast. He didn't ask for anything else, and Lydia didn't force small talk. She only rested a gentle hand on Rex's head before walking away. That, Walter noticed, was a kindness earned, not casual. Harlan stayed a moment longer. You just passing through, he asked. Something like that. Heading somewhere or leaving something behind? Walter didn't respond. A long silence settled. Harlan seemed to accept that answer too. Well, he said, tapping the counter once. The war may be over for the country, but it's never over for the men who fought it. Coffee's on the house. That much I can still afford to give. He turned away, but not before his eyes flicked toward Rex again, as if he wished he'd had one of his own when he came home. Walter sat with his food, but hardly touched it. He kept watching the room, the exit, the windows, the mountains outside. Rex finally nudged his knee, a gentle signal, a reminder to breathe. Walter exhaled. I'm here. he whispered to Rex. Not back there. I'm here. Outside, the wind pushed more yellow leaves across the parking lot. Walter paid the bill. Lydia tried to refuse part of it, but he left the cash anyway, and he and Rex walked back to the truck. Harlan watched through the window, arms crossed, his face unreadable except for one thing: recognition. Not of Walter specifically, but of what lived behind his eyes. As Walter opened the door, Rex jumped in first, settling into his seat. Walter followed, gripping the steering wheel before starting the engine. For a moment, he looked at the diner through the windshield. Normal people eating normal food, in a normal town. But inside that building were at least two men still carrying entire wars. He turned the key. They drove on. I don't know where the war was, but I see that it still lives in their eyes, even when they're just sitting in a quiet diner. Walter drove north, the road narrowing into a rougher path of gravel and cracked asphalt as the forests thickened around them. The sky had shifted from pale morning light to a heavy blanket of gray, clouds pressing low enough to erase the sun entirely. Wind swept through the pine trees, breaking fallen branches and sending needles spinning across the hood of the truck. They were getting close to Clearwater Lake. Walter hadn't spoken it aloud, but Rex could sense a change in him, his breathing deeper, slower, as if preparing for something he didn't want to meet. The truck eventually reached a point where the road ended, and nature reclaimed everything. A faded wooden sign half swallowed by moss read, Clearwater Trail, 2.5 miles. Walter parked, killed the engine, and just sat there for a long second, both hands gripping the steering wheel. Rex watched him, tail still. Finally, Walter opened the door. The cold wind rushed in immediately. He adjusted his jacket, then reached for his backpack. Nothing heavy, just water, a map, a small metal box he didn't open, and a folded chain necklace he slipped into his pocket without looking at it. They started down the trail. The path was narrow, surrounded by high spruce trees that blocked the sky. The air filled with the scent of sap, wet bark, and the kind of quiet only deep forests know. But the silence didn't last. A low rumble began, distant at first, then growing. Rex froze, ears shooting up. Walter stopped walking, head turning slightly, as if resisting a memory trying to force its way in. Then the sound became clear. Helicopter blades, chopping through the air, still miles away, but unmistakable. A military training drill, maybe from the nearby airfield, perfectly normal for the area, but not normal for Walter. His breath changed instantly. His hands twitched. The trees, the wind, the cold, everything around him dissolved into something else, something old and violent. His knees buckled and he dropped, one hand digging into the dirt, the other clutching his head as if trying to stop something from exploding out of it. Rex reacted instantly, training overriding instinct. He circled once, then planted himself directly in front of Walter, body firm, tail lowered, barking, short, sharp barks meant to snap focus, not defend. He nudged Walter's chest, pushing against him, grounding his weight into the man's shaking frame. Walter couldn't see the forest anymore. In his head it was sand, smoke, and screaming. Someone yelling for help. Someone he couldn't reach. The sound of rotors meant evacuation, but it came late. Always late. Rex pressed harder, letting out a single deep growl, a different cue. You're not there. You're here. Walter's fingers dug into the dog's fur. His voice cracked. I'm here. I'm here. I'm not back there. I'm here. He repeated it, slower each time, like a man learning to breathe again. The helicopter sound faded into distance. Only wind remained. After nearly a full minute, Walter finally looked up, and the forest returned. Rex stayed still, watching him with steady, amber eyes. Walter let out a breath that seemed to empty years. "Good boy," he whispered. His voice was raw, but it was present. He placed one hand on the back of Rex's neck. Not a command, not a pat. A thank you. They continued walking, slower now. The trail opened briefly near a clearing where an old ranger station sat abandoned, windows broken, wood panels peeling. The place looked like it hadn't belonged to anyone in 20 years. A rusted bicycle leaned against the wall, covered in pine resin. On the porch, a pair of battered hiking boots sat like someone had left them mid-journey and never returned. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Just time doing what war never could. Erasing without violence. Rex sniffed the doors, tail low but not alarmed. Walter glanced at the boots, then looked away, expression unreadable. They moved on until the trees parted just enough to reveal the first glimpse of water. Dark, still, framed by broken reflections of clouds. Clearwater Lake. Walter stopped again. Not from fear this time, just memory, rising like something stored in the lake's silent surface. Rex stayed by his side, waiting, not pulling forward, not rushing. He knew the difference between stopping because of trauma and stopping because of grief. Walter put his hand in his pocket and touched the chain. His jaw tightened, the way it always did before he spoke a truth out loud. But he didn't speak yet. He stepped forward, one slow step closer to the lake. A man can leave the battlefield, but the battlefield does not always leave the man. Night settled over the forest, like a slow curtain, the last of the gray daylight fading behind the pines. Walter built a small fire in the clearing near the lake, the flames flickering against the cold air. The temperature had dropped to the low 40s, and the wind carried the sharpness of mountain water and wet leaves. Rex lay near the fire, head up, eyes alert, but his posture relaxed. He knew this was not a night of danger, but a night of wait. Walter sat on a fallen log, hands open toward the fire, letting the heat crawl through stiff knuckles. He hadn't spoken much since the episode on the trail, but silence with Rex wasn't the same as being alone. The dog watched him the way only a creature without judgment could, waiting, not asking. Walter finally broke the quiet. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think I'd come back here alone." He glanced at Rex. Guess life did something smart for once. He took a slow breath, then reached into his jacket and pulled out the object he had been avoiding since the trip began. A small chain with a dull dog tag hanging from it. The edges were scuffed, the engraving slightly worn, but the name was still clear. Tyler A. McKenna, USMC O Post Catholic. Rex's ears tilted forward, sensing the shift. Walter stared at the tag for a long moment before speaking again. Tyler wasn't just another Marine. He was 22. Still had the kind of smile that made you believe things might work out. He could run a mile in 6 minutes and still laugh at the finish line. A weak smile touched Walter's mouth. Said he was going to open a mechanic shop when he got home. He never stopped talking about cars. Walter didn't blink, didn't look away. The fire reflected in his eyes like something burning from the inside out. It happened during a patrol. We were splitting the squad, left flank, right flank. I was the one giving the order. His jaw tightened. I chose right. Tyler went left. He paused, and the crack of the fire filled the space between words. There was a mortar. We never saw it coming. The ground blew apart. Tyler didn't even have time to turn his head. His voice lowered, breaking into gravel. They said it was no one's fault. Just bad timing, bad ground, Wrong second on the clock. Walter dragged a hand down his face, the lines in his skin deepening. But I know the truth. He followed my command, and I didn't stop him. I knew he wanted to prove himself. I knew he was young. I should have pulled rank. I should have said no. His voice fell to a whisper. He didn't die because he chose wrong. He died because I didn't stop him. Rex stood up slowly and moved closer, pressing his chest against Walter's knee, head tilted up. The dog didn't lick, didn't whine, just existed in the same pain without trying to fix it. Walter's hand rested on Rex's head, and for the first time that day, the tremor in his voice wasn't fear, it was grief. He was wearing this, Walter said, lifting the dog tag. They gave it back to me in a bag. I shoved it in a drawer for 8 years. Thought if I didn't touch it, maybe it wouldn't be real anymore. His throat closed, but it never stopped being real, did it? Wind swept through the trees, scattering embers upward like sparks rising to a dark sky. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, a long, echoing note across the lake. Walter watched the fire, the tag, then Rex. I don't know if coming back here is going to change anything, but I guess I'm finally done running from it. Rex shifted to sit beside him, shoulder touching his leg, silent and steady. Walter exhaled, a long breath that seemed to take years with it. I do not hear the bombs or the gunfire, but I hear the word "if only" inside his voice. It explodes, quiet, endless, and never stops. Morning crept slowly into the forest, not with brightness, but with a pale fog that drifted low across the ground like silent breath. The air was colder than the night before, the kind of cold that clung to bones even through layers of fabric. Dew glazed the leaves, and every sound, the rustle of branches, the quiet drip of condensation, felt like it belonged to a world still half asleep. The lake wasn't visible yet, but its presence could be sensed in the thinning of the trees, the shift in the scent of the air, the faint echo of water against stone. Walter knelt beside the fire pit he and Rex had slept near, tying the last knot on his bootlace. His movements were steady, but his eyes were far away, somewhere between memory and intention. He reached into his jacket, pulled out Tyler's chain again, and stared at the tag resting in his palm. The metal was cold, the truth attached to it even colder. He slipped it into the chest pocket of his jacket, not hiding it this time, carrying it. Rex, sitting nearby with ears perked and fur catching the morning mist, watched quietly. His coat, black saddle pattern over tan legs and chest, looked darker in the muted light. At 5 years old, he was in his prime, strong and alert, but the calm in his eyes showed experience beyond instinct. He wasn't just following Walter. He was walking with him. Walter stood, tightened the strap on his backpack, and looked down at Rex. No command, no whistle, just the simple sentence he hadn't been able to say until now. "We finished this together, buddy." Rex rose instantly, tail low but steady, ready. They walked the last stretch of the trail, the dirt path narrowing, roots twisting across it like veins. The forest felt untouched, almost sacred. No tire marks, no campers, no chatter, just the rhythm of boots and paws. As they pushed farther in, the trees began to separate, opening into a clearing where light filtered through in long, golden beams. Rex slowed first, sensing the change before sight confirmed it. The lake appeared like a sheet of still glass, dark and quiet under the rising sun. Clearwater Lake, wide, undisturbed, bordered by steep evergreens and stone. Walter stopped at the edge of the tree line, not stepping forward yet. His breathing changed the way it had on the road, but not because of panic this time, because of memory settling into its final form. He walked to a flat rock near the water, the one he must have stood on years ago. He rested his hand on it, feeling the rough, cold surface. He didn't sit. He didn't speak. He let the silence build first, not emptiness, but space. Finally, he took the chain from his pocket, held it. The tag swung slightly in the wind. The reflection of the lake danced across it. "I brought you home, kid," Walter said, voice steady but soft. "Not the way I should have, not when it mattered. But I'm here now, and I'm not running anymore." He crouched and placed the tag on the rock, not buried, not thrown. Laid down where the world could see it, but the past could stay in one place. His hand lingered, then lifted. Rex moved closer and stood beside him, touching his nose lightly to Walter's arm. Not pushing him forward, not pulling him back, just anchoring him to the ground. Walter looked out over the lake, the wind lifting the edges of his jacket. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think the worst part of war was losing people. Turns out the worst part is living long enough to know the world forgot them." Rex didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Loss, acceptance, release. Walter exhaled, long and full, the kind that opened space in the chest instead of tightening it. The sun finally broke through the fog, scattering light over the lake. For the first time in years, Walter watched it without flinching at what it reminded him of. Without turning, he spoke again, more gently. "Let's go home." He didn't specify where home was. Maybe it wasn't a place. Maybe it was simply a version of himself he could return to. He stood, brushed the dirt from his hands, and took one last look at the dog tag on the rock. He didn't feel the urge to pick it up again. Rex stepped beside him, waiting. They walked away from the lake. Not fast, not slow, just forward. The forest closed behind them, and the morning wind carried the sound of water like a final heartbeat. "He did not bring me because I am a dog. He brought me because some paths are too heavy to walk alone. Sometimes the greatest battles are not fought on foreign soil, but inside the hearts we carry home." Walter didn't return to the lake to erase the past. He returned so it could finally rest where it belonged. And maybe that is the quiet miracle God gives us. Not the power to forget what hurt us, but the strength to walk forward with it and still choose peace. Because in every wound that heals, in every memory that softens, in every night we survive to see the morning, there is a trace of his hand. A reminder that no one walks through the valley alone, not even the ones who believe they must. So if you're watching this right now, may the same grace that found Walter find you too. May God bless your steps, comfort your pain, and protect the people you love, just as he watched over a broken soldier and the loyal dog who never left his side. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment and share what part spoke to your heart. Share this video with someone who needs comfort today, and subscribe, because more stories of hope, healing, and faith are on the way. God bless you for being here, truly. May God watch over every person who listens to this story, every family who needs healing, and every heart still carrying a silent battle. You are not forgotten. You are not walking alone. Amen.